Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do the second of my thrift shop hauls. In the last video, in the last thrift shop haul that I did, I said I'd probably do it in a couple of days, but I actually got some extra time now, so I figured I would do it now. Um, so, same day, different pile, and so I thought we'd get into that. And this one's a little bit bigger. This one I went out like a week or so ago, and I went to 4 thrift shops, and I found a good amount of stuff. So let's go through it and see what you think of it. All right. So the first 2 things I got were the Da Vinci Code. All right, got a nice slipcase on it, and Angels and Demons. So this is the first and the second installment of the Dan Brown novels that were adapted on to film and star Tom Hanks. So this one is a 2-disc theatrical and extended edition Blu-ray. So it actually has got a digital copy in it. Let's turn that around. It's got the theatrical version, the extended version, and it has a whole nother Blu-ray full of special features, which is kind of cool. And then, of course, it has the digital copy, right? So the special features, um, I won't go through them. It's fine. Anyway, so basically what I had before. Now, in previous videos, I I showed that I found the 3rd installment of it, which is called Inferno, and I thought that was when I first saw it and then chose it and then picked it up, I thought it was a Dario Argento film, Inferno, the Dario Argento film, but it ended up being the Ron Howard film, the 3rd installment of this franchise, right? So I got that on Blu-ray. So I had these 2 on DVD. So then I found these 2 at a pawn shop. So now I can upgrade this uh, double DVD set into 2 Blu-rays instead. So that's kind of cool. That's the reason why I picked them up. Now, what would be good is if I could find something like that in Blu-ray, but all 3 films all at once in one box set would be nice, and that would save a lot of shelf space, right? So, all right, so that's those. Next up is, so I collect, uh, the Disney animated features on Blu-ray. Um, I usually like to get the DVD and the Blu-ray, but with animated features, I prefer just the Blu-ray. And then when 4K comes out and I can get it at a reasonable price, I'll pick up the 4Ks because, with cartoons or with animated films, it's the clarity that matters more um, than in a regular film. Regular film, you can watch it on DVD, and even though it's a bit blurry here or there, you don't really notice it once you start watching the film. But with animated features, the higher the resolution, the more enjoyment it is to watch, especially computer generated imagery, right? It looks really good when it's really clear. It doesn't look as good when it's not as clear, right? So anyways, this is Chicken Little. This is the 47th animated feature put out by Walt Disney, all right? And it came out in 2005. And it's basically, an expansion of the Chicken Little story where the acorn falls on the chicken's head and he screams bloody murder, saying that the sky is falling and scares the crap out of everybody. Well, basically, that's the premise of this film as well. Um, but it involves aliens and all these other things, which is kind of cool. So it was actually quite an enjoyable film when I watched it. So I figured I'd pick it up on Blu-ray and add it to my collection. All right. So that's Chicken Little. All right. It was the 46th animated feature put out by Disney. Next up, we're going to go in a completely different direction, but in the same year, and that's Land of the Dead by George Romero. All right, so he had 6. So he was there was movies before it that kind of had zombies in it, but he's the one that kind of popularized the zombie flick, right? So if you're gonna watch zombie films, you got to get his films, right? So I mean, you don't have to, but I mean, if you really want to watch the best of the zombie films, get his 6 films, and this one's the fourth. It's called Land of the Dead. So you basically had Night of the Living Dead, then you had Dawn of the Dead, then you had Day of the Dead, then you had Land of the Dead, then you had Diary of the Dead, and then you had Survival of the Dead. All right. So if you get those 6 and watch all of them, you'll see the development of what George A. Romero thinks of zombies. This one I found quite interesting, although most of the people that I know didn't like it too much. They thought it was okay, but basically this one I found cool because it was the first time uh, you saw zombies thinking. All right, so they started to think. Right, there's a guy. What did they call him in the? I can't remember, but there was a zombie who actually started thinking and leading other zombies, and they would like pick up, um, like rifles and use them, right? So that takes a bit of intelligence, right? So the zombies are thinking in this film, right? And it's basically um, takes place in Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh, where you got the 2 rivers on one side, and they put up a big electrical fence on the third side, and it's a big triangle, and uh, and it protects all the people. But eventually, the zombies will get in, right? Anyways, so it was a pretty fun film to watch. Um, and if you like zombie films, you're gonna like it. So I got it. I have it on DVD now. I have it on Blu-ray, and I'll combine the two. So that's Land of the Dead from 2005. All right. The other one I found is this one. Uh, Jimmy plays Berkeley. All right. So this is a 1971. I think it's 1971, 1970 concert. Actually, it's a 2-day concert. He played 2 days at Berkeley, and basically this is the documentary that documents that. So you'll get um, performances of him on stage, but in between it's still it's not like a concert film only. It's like a documentary film as well. So you'll get his performances, and then you'll also get clips of what's going on at Berkeley during this time. This is all the radical anti Vietnam stuff and things like that. So it's a pretty interesting film. So I found it and picked it up, and I got it for like $2 or whatever, right? So can't go wrong with that. Um, all right, so that's Jimmy Plays Berkeley, and then I also went into a pawn shop and I found these 2 things, and I went cool, all right, because I like box sets, and so you have the 2 airplane films, Airplane and Airplane 2, the sequel, and you have the 3 Naked Gun films, Naked Gun 2.5, and Naked Gun 33 and a third, all starring, if I remember correctly. Did Airplane 2 star Leslie Nielsen? I'm not sure. It's about the space shuttle instead of the airplane, right? And I saw it, but I saw it like such a long time ago. Yeah, no, I don't think he's in this one. It's the only one that he isn't in out of the 5 films. So basically, if you like kind of slapstick comedy and like you know sexual innuendo and a bit of stupidity, most people like Leslie Nielsen and his comedy. So I got 5 of them, and I got these 2 for like $5, I think it was. So that's cool. I'll add these to my collection until I find the Blu-rays for them. So that's kind of cool. Um, and Don't Call Me Shirley. All right, so those are the films that I picked up, and I picked up some books as well. All right, so I didn't pick up any CDs in this haul, but I did pick up a bunch of books as well. So the first book is 3 Days Before the Shooting. Now, uh, it's by American author Ralph Ellison, and Ralph Ellison is most famous for his 1950s novel *The Invisible Man*, which kind of documents what it's like to be black in America. Right, so it's one of his most. I think it won the National Book Award. Anyways, it's his seminal work, and he was working on his second novel when he died. And so this is basically his second novel, edited from manuscripts and then put together from about 2,000 pages of writing by Ellison. So people really liked The Invisible Man, and they were sad at Ellison's death. and they wanted more from him, so they put this together. The Modern Library put this out in, what was it, 2010. All right, so his first book he wrote in 1952, and then they put out a more condensed version of this in 1999. But then they put out an expanded version. The Modern Library did. And remember, I spoke about the Modern Library and the Everyman Library um, in previous videos. If you've watched them, the Modern Library. This is part of the Modern Library um, set of books. But most of the Modern Library are kind of like silverish green covers, and they're not usually this large. So, but you will have the Modern Library putting out one-offs, kind of like this, that don't match the rest of the library. And they made a special edition for this gentleman, Ralph Ellison. All right, so I have not read this book. Um, it is a very large tome. Let's put it that way, and maybe I'll have some time to read it. And speaking of another large book, all right, I also found Stephen King's It in paperback. All right, now this is a significant book because I read it. Well, I read, I don't know, half of it or three-quarters of it. I can't remember exactly where I stopped. But this has the distinction of being the book that put me off Stephen King. I used to read all of his novels. His favorite novel, it's funny because he's mostly a horror writer, but my favorite novels by him are his fantasy novels. So like I liked the Gunslinger series that he wrote. Um, um, now I didn't read now it came out in 1986, and I think the Gunslinger series came out after that. But I had read the Gunslinger series, but I had not read it yet. So I'm not sure. I think it was in the mid 90s, early 2000s that I stopped, that I read this book and I stopped. But I had read like a ton of his stuff. But I like his fantasy stuff, like The Year of the Dragon, The Day of the Dragon. Anyways, I'll put it down here. It's Something of the Dragon, Land of the Dragon. That was a pretty good read as well. But it's The Stand and The Talisman are his two best. So The Stand, about that post-apocalyptic world, and The Talisman, where the boy kind of phases into two different worlds that are kind of parallel dimensions of Earth, right? And one's more fantasy oriented, the other one's more reality, like our day oriented. And that was done with Peter Straub, right? Those two. So the Dragon book, the Gunslinger series, but especially The Stand and The Talisman were always my favorite Stephen King books because I like fantasy more than I like horror. But I picked this up and I began reading it, and I got to the point where they're searching for, the clown or the alien's lair in the sewers underneath. What was the town? Was it? It's in Maine, right? He always puts his. Anyways, so there was a group of kids, and they were called what? The Losers Club, something like the Loser. It's been a while since I read it. Let me look at this. Yeah, the Losers Club. All right. So, and it was, I don't know how many boys, but there was one girl in it and a group of boys, and they end up, um, coming into contact with this clown that kills children, right? And he's actually not a clown; he's actually an alien. And they look for his base or whatever in the sewer system. And then when they get into the sewer system, they get lost. Somehow they get lost. And for some reason, I don't know why, but Stephen King had this idea that popped into his head that the only way that they could figure out how to get out of this sewer was to have all the boys have sex with the girl. So basically, a huge orgy of underage children, right? And that went, okay. That isn't horror anymore. That's just gross. All right, and I said, okay, if Stephen King's mind is going in this direction, I don't really want to read him anymore, right? So I basically put this book down, and then I um, stopped reading them. I went on to other authors. There's so many other authors to read, right? So it that kind of like turned my stomach. That idea, not um like I don't understand the point of it, right? There was no point to that. Like how like you're gonna. like bang an idea into the girl so that she can get the directions. I just don't understand that. I couldn't figure that out where he got that from. And Stephen King's writing, some of it's good, some of it's not so good because he puts out so much so quickly. Maybe that was just something that popped into his head and then he went with it or whatever. I don't know. But I went, okay, I think I've read enough of Stephen King in my lifetime, and this is the book that stopped me from reading any further of his stuff. So, anyway, so that's it. Next up is a 1891 novel. All right. And it's Oscar Wilde's only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. And basically, you probably know the story about like a very beautiful man um, who doesn't want to lose his looks. So he makes, he sells his soul for his look. So a picture that his friend painted of him grows older and he stays young. And he gets into all this debauchery and all this, you know, deviant sexuality stuff or whatever in the film. It was a big stink when this thing came out, in the 1890s or whatever, right? So, but it's become one of the one of his signature. It's his only novel. He wrote some plays and everything, but it's it's one of the great novels these days, right? And it's this one. This copy is from the Modern Library Classics, and as with this hardcover, um, the Modern Library has put out basically paperback or trade paperback sized novels of all the classics as well, right? So you can get them in hardcover or you can get them in softcover as well. So there's a popular series that's just it's in competition with the Oxford World's classics and the Penguin classics, and I think those two outsell this one, but don't quote me on that. All right. So that's The Picture of Dorian Gray. Next up is what many consider as Ernest Hemingway's greatest novel, which is The Sun Also Rises, which basically is almost autobiographical about his time when he lived in Paris and he did a travel to Spain to go watch the running of the bulls. This basically is a book about that. And the subject matter, I don't know if it's like exciting enough to consider this his greatest novel, but it's the way that he writes. Hemingway there are some novelists that need to write about interesting things in order to grab you and keep you reading. And then there are some novelists or writers who doesn't matter what they write, just like certain singers can sing the alphabet, they have such a great voice and you'll still listen. Certain writers can write so well that they could be talking about, a pile of dog shit and you would find it interesting and you would continue reading. That's how well they write. Charles Dickens is one, Mark Twain is another, and Ernest Hemingway is another. And this book is, well, you'll have to read it. You'll have to understand his way of writing that attracts so many people to reading his stuff. And it's his writing, not necessarily the subject matter, that's so interesting to read. All right. And next up, I got Adventures in the Skin Trade by Dylan Thomas. I don't know a lot about this. This is uh, Adventures in the Skin Trade was Dylan Thomas's novel that he didn't complete. And they have a bunch of short stories in here as well. And one of his more famous ones is in here, which is called what? The Burning Baby, if you remember that one, if you've read it. Anyway, so this is a collection of Dylan Thomas's stuff that I figure I haven't read Adventures in the Skin Trade yet, so maybe I can read it now, right? So that's the next one. The next book is I found a nice copy of Puffin. They're called the Puffin Classics, and they're basically children's novels. So Penguin puts out the black ones for their classics, but if it's a classic and it's more children or young adult oriented, they put it under what's called the Puffin label, right? So or imprint or whatever. So this one is part of the Puffin imprint, and it's The Wizard of Oz, and everybody knows the story of the Wizard of Oz. So I thought maybe I'd read this to my son. All right. And next up is, speaking of Charles Dickens, which I just mentioned, here's his book, The Old Curiosity Shop. And I haven't read this book yet, but this is basically about a 14-year-old girl. What was her name? Her name was Nell Trent, and her grandfather, who owned a curiosity shop in London. And she's an orphan. She lives with her grandfather because her parents are dead, and so her her grandfather wants to leave her with a, a large sum of money so that she doesn't end up destitute like her parents and end up dying from it, out of poverty or whatever, right? So he gambles and he loses a bunch of his money to this hunchback moneylender guy, and so he loses the shop to this moneylender guy. So him and Nell um, take off from London and go away from the city and go elsewhere, and then the story is about people trying to find them all the time. And anyways, it's his most popular novel during his lifetime, or popular writing during his lifetime, was this. Now, his greatest novel is probably Great Expectations, but if you like just great writing, it doesn't matter what Charles Dickens writes about, it's always interesting because the way that he writes and uses his mind is just extremely, extremely fun to read, enjoyable to read, right? So, and his language is great as well. So, a lot of people will read Charles Dickens if they're inspiring writings, and you'll end up, learning some things about how to write just by reading his novels. But his novels are quite interesting. This is another one of his novels that is great. I have not read this one. I have read Great Expectations, A Tale of Two Cities, Christmas Carol, A Child's History of England. That was pretty interesting. And a bunch of other stuff, but I haven't read this one, so now I can. All right. And the last book and the last piece of media that I in is found in the thrift shop is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Now, this is my all-time favorite book. I've read it numerous times, and I saw it. And you ever see the movie Conspiracy Theory, starring Mel Gibson? And every time, I think it's from that movie, right? He Every time he passes by a bookstore, he has to go in and buy A Catcher in the Rye. Remember that part of that movie? Anyways, he has a compulsion, and he just keeps buying that book over and over again. He doesn't know why; he just has a compulsion for it. But whenever I see this book, and I don't have it in this edition, I'll end up picking it up, and that just gives me another reason to read it, right? So, um, I'll probably end up selling it, but I saw it. It cost me $2 to buy it, so it basically is one of the greatest, you know, uh, dystopian novels, sci-fi fantasy novels ever written. It's up there with like Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale or George Orwell's 1984. Brave New World is one of the great, and it's basically about eugenics. If you ever want to read about eugenics and that whole movement and science at the time back in the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, that time, and how that idea was debunked, right? But it was a great Hitler was one of the ones that pro- proposed it as true or whatever, right? Basically, eugenics is that if you take a superior breed of human and you breed it with another superior breed of human, you can breed over time greater and greater supermen, right? And basically, it's like breeding dogs. If you breed purebred dogs, you'll get a better purebred dog, and it doesn't work that way. Actually, you need a mutt in there every once in a while. Otherwise, the inbreeding of it ends up making the dog more and more fragile, right? So eugenics doesn't really work, but it's basically Huxley took eugenics and put it towards what would happen if you use that as a basis for society. So basically, people are bred, they don't get married. There's three levels of human beings, like the epsilons, I can't remember all three, but and they're all happy in their in their station in life, and when they're not, there's soma, which is a drug that they can take. And anyways, it's a pretty interesting book, and you won't put it down if you pick it up if you haven't read it yet. You pick it up, you read it, it'll be difficult to put it down until you're finished, right? So it's called A Brave New World, and it's by Huxley, Aldous Huxley. In fact, much of his writing is very good. His essays are really good as well, if you want to read those as well. But this novel here is one of the greatest novels of all time, and my argument for the greatest novel of the 20th century. But it's my all-time favorite book. All right, so those are the books and the movies. And I didn't have any CDs in this haul, so hopefully you had a interesting time watching this video. If you have any comments about it, what'd you think of Airplane or Airplane 2? Airplane 2, not so good. Airplane, pretty good. What do you think of the Naked Gun series? I thought that was pretty hilarious. What do you think of the Da Vinci Code series? Okay, I collect Ron Howard as a director, so I add that to my collection. What do you think of the 6 movies by Romero? Land of the Dead being the 4th one. I think the his first one is my all-time favorite, although Dawn of the Dead is considered by many as his best. But I kind of like Land of the Dead, and I like Dawn of the Dead, the remake, um, that stars Sarah Polley. I really like that one. Actually, I like it more than the original, right? So, anyways, that, or what do you think of the books? Did you read Picture of Dorian Gray? What did you think of it? I thought it was a very good novel. This one is the one that killed me. What did you think of that? If you read it, what did you think of that scene in the sewer system where the the only way they could figure out how to get out of the sewer system was to gangbang like a an underage girl or whatever, right? I mean, they're all underage, so I guess um, there wasn't a big, huge whatever uproar about it. I mean, if Stephen King wrote that and it was an adult, like 5 or 6 adults that did that, yeah, that book would be, there'd be a lot of shit hitting the fan or whatever, right? But it's all underage, right? But just, it just didn't make any sense to me. How would you come up with thinking that? Wouldn't it be better if, I don't know, you flipped a coin? I mean, that's how relatable getting out of a sewer would be. There's no, I don't understand the leap, right? Anyway, so that, or have you read Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man? That was extremely good. Have you read this one? This one is pretty good as well, but it's more of his writing. Anyways, I'm starting to blabber on. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, leave a thumbs up. If you wish to, I would appreciate it if you subscribed, and more of these videos will be coming in the future. All right, and thank you for watching again, and you have a good day, and bye for now.